Shalom, Erev Tov, good evening from Jerusalem, Israel. This is Lowell Joseph Gallen, founder of the Root and Branch Association Limited, established in New York State, in God of Israel, Bless America in 1981, and now celebrating our 40th anniversary, 40 years young. I would like to welcome our viewers and listeners worldwide and our live Zoom studio audience to this evening's program in our Root and Branch Association Limited English Language Conference and Lecture Series, broadcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. And now celebrating the start of our second quarter century, our second 25 years. As I always do at the beginning of each program, I thank those Hakarat Tov, acknowledging the good, those who hosted our first quarter century from January 1995 through December 2020. The Orthodox Union of the United States Israel Center, 22 Karen Hayesod Street, and its remarkable former educational director, he's retired now, and founder and editor-in-chief of the Torah Tidbits publication, Mr. Phil Chernovsky, his Eshet Chayil, Woman of Valor, Mrs. Tony Chernovsky, and the long-suffering Mrs. Itta Rachel Russick, the scheduler, who keeps the trains running in and out of Grand Central Station over there without having a crash. I don't know how she does it. If I had her job, I would have been carried out on a stretcher years ago. Thanks to all of you for giving us such a warm welcome for 25 years, up until everything got shut down. Then I had to learn how to use this Zoom thing, and I do it from my kitchen. That doesn't mean we won't come back to do things live there too. Now I get lazy and comfortable here. So today is Tuesday, June 29, 2021 in the Gregorian calendar, and the 19th day of Tammuz 5781 in the Hebrew Israelite calendar. As we always like to do, we remember relevant dates in history around this time. Well, it's getting a little far, but May 16th, 1943, the Nazi Germans finally put down the Jewish uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, which I would like to think in some way inspired the Polish Catholics for their uprising a year later against the Nazis. Most people don't even remember that. They had 200,000 killed by the Nazis. I think the two should be remembered together. And we remember the 5th day of June, 1967, the first day of the miraculous Six-Day War. And it looks like we're gonna have to fight that all over again. And June 6, 1944, when Allied armies, primarily from Canada, England, and America, landed at Omaha and other beaches in Normandy, France, to begin the liberation of France and Western Europe from Nazi Germany. We remember those who sacrificed so that we could be here today. And we remember others who sacrificed. On June 22nd, 1941, was on a Sunday. Last week, I think that was a Tuesday. The Nazi Germans began their invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, which resulted in the extended mass murder of us in the Holocaust. Hitler had finally finalized his plans for that at the Wannsee Conference, and the mass murder of about 30 million Slavs along the way too, before it was all over. So we remember the Red Army, which if it wasn't for them, we probably wouldn't be here today. We remember all of them for the sacrifices that you made so we could be here today. Now, we are broadcasting from the land of Israel, city of God, Jerusalem, Hill of the Priests, right, Hill of the Priests, Givat Hanania, Abu Tur, overlooking Mount Moriah, right out the window, where the third and final Israelite temple of Jerusalem, we believe, will soon be under reconstruction and stand forever, as per the prophet Ezekiel. Please see the biblical book of Ezekiel, chapters 40 through 48. The Root and Branch Association promotes faith in the God of Israel who created us all, for the nations to honor and observe God's Noahide covenant and laws with all humanity. Please see the biblical book of Genesis chapter 9. If you are a Christian, please see the book of Acts chapter 15. and for all Jews and non-Jews to honor God's land, Torah, and people covenants with his chosen people, Israel. We are 12 tribes. When that happens, most of the problems we see today between Israel and the nations and each other will disappear by definition. And we hope it will be very soon. Now, our speaker for this evening's program is a very special person, and that is Ms Ruthie Blum. And she is going to be properly introduced by my colleague, Dr. Les Glassman. He's a dentist. If you need a crown or a root canal, please come to Jerusalem and see Les. Ruthie is going to be speaking about possible pitfalls of the post-Trump, post-Netanyahu era. And she's going to get a proper introduction from Think Yiddish, Dress British, Dr. Glassman. I'm the loudmouth New York Jew. He is very polite from South Africa. It was one of the dominions, so he's very polite and has that nice Commonwealth accent. Before we begin, we introduce one panelist you can see and one panelist who can see you. The panelist who you can see is Professor Asher Mattathias, above, Zorba the Jew, born in a cave in Nazi-occupied Greece in 1943, saved by the grace of God and a compassionate Wehrmacht officer. And this, stories like that should be books and movie series. Actually, we got to talk to somebody about that. And the other, before we begin, panelists I want to introduce who can see you, but you can't see him. This is, you see that? That's painted by my Eshet Chayil, woman of valor, the Lady Rachel. This is Lieutenant Colonel Martin Gallen, Esquire, NYU Law Review, 1949, ROTC at City College in the 1930s, entered active duty in the United States Army as lieutenant in 1942, European theater, concluded the war as a captain, joined the reserves, and then retired as lieutenant colonel. And my father's body returned to the earth and his soul returned to the heavens on October 16th, 2018. He was buried with full military honors by a United States Army military honor guard that came from a base in New Jersey for that ceremony. Having said all of that, I'm going to mute my mic and turn this over to Dr. Glassman, who is going to introduce our distinguished speaker. Les, it's all yours.
Oh, thank you so much. Very kind of you. So, Ruthie, we go back actually 7 years ago. You were in a conversation with David Horowitz in the Great Synagogue. And I had the great honor and privilege really to video. And I videoed that conversation that you did. And many people all over the world watched your talk that you gave together where David Horowitz interviewed you. And I remember it like yesterday. It was an amazing event. But I'm just going to speak a little bit about you because we could spend a whole session just speaking about your incredible achievements. You were born in New York. You come from the States. You went to Bronx Science Alumni Foundation. You studied at the University of Chicago, and then English literature at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And what's very interesting for our listeners out there, the Hebrew University is regarded as one of the top universities in the world. I think it was at one time ranked number 60. So that is quite an achievement. But more than that, you were the former managing editor and writer at the Algemeyer, former web editor and writer also at the Voice of Israel, which many of our viewers remember the Voice of Israel with, I remember it very, very well as well. And now you're a columnist at the Jerusalem Post. And I just want to mention, you appear in the Friday edition, and so many family and friends of mine and my wife's, they open the newspaper and they go immediately to your column because it's so insightful and it's so brilliant. And I have family in South Africa and all over, and they always comment on your column that you write in the Jerusalem Post, which is, we so look forward to it. And you also columnist at the jns.org. I'll be watching you, and we've all been watching you on R24. And we thought, well, how come you haven't been on recently? And only tonight did I hear that you actually not in Israel at the moment, you actually live in Tel Aviv, but you're in New York visiting your parents. You'll be for another 2 months. So we're going to miss you on R24 because you really, when you appear, you give such a wonderful insight into what's going on. And we so appreciate your expertise and the wonderful take that you give. And it's a fresh of fresh air. It's wonderful hearing you. So we look forward in great anticipation to your talk tonight. And without any further ado, it's really a great honor, privilege to have you, Ruthie, and over to you. Thank you.
Les, that was such a lovely introduction, and I hope I can live up to it. First of all, I'm very happy to hear that you say that that your friends and family read my Friday column in the Jerusalem Post, because if you read the comments at the end of those columns, not only are several of them openly anti-Semitic, but they are very, very insulting on a personal level. They're, very blatant attacks. So it's nice to hear that not everybody hates them, I have to say. Now, the reason I titled my talk, Possible Pitfalls of the Post-Trump and Post-Netanyahu era, is that there's something quite extraordinary about what's happened in the past year in both countries. Think about it. A year ago, we had Donald Trump in the White House, Netanyahu as prime minister, and both of them together and separately doing incredible things for the Jewish people and for the free world. Of course, I'm not only talking about the embassy move, the US embassy move to Jerusalem, and the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and the recognition of the Golan Heights as sovereign Israeli territory, or even the decision to no longer refer to the West Bank and Gaza and the Golan as occupied. And I mean, the list goes on. But then we come to the amazing Abraham Accords, the treaties with between Israel and the Arab world that Netanyahu has for many, many years been saying is possible. And of course, the real reason that it was achievable is that Trump understood or allowed himself to be persuaded by Netanyahu that the Palestinian issue is not necessary. You can't solve it, or it's certainly until the Palestinians want to solve it. You can't, it's not necessary to forge peace in the Middle East through the Palestinians. It's ridiculous. Netanyahu has been saying that, as he has been warning about the Iranian nuclear threat for decades. And this confluence of Arab countries equally afraid of the Iranian threat, and even let's say less interested in the Palestinians than their lip service during Arab summits would indicate. All of these forces came together to not only make peace, but and Israel are the greatest countries in the world, that America is the leader of the free world, and that Israel is its greatest ally. It was an incredible, it was incredibly uplifting. And then what happened in both countries, it's quite shocking. You'd say, how is this possible that a mere year ago, all these incredible achievements were made, and now both leaders are out? Well, I argue that it's all the fault of the pandemic. And why? Because even though Netanyahu became famous for having procured the vaccines necessary to start getting the public vaccinated quickly, better than anyone else in the world, faster than anyone else in the world, by that time, both countries were in the throes of not so much the coronavirus. I mean, I hate to say it, it's a terrible illness, but more than the terrible illness was what it did to the societies and the whole world, actually, locking everybody down. It was like a pressure cooker wherever you were. And the already brewing cultural tensions and left-right splits and others just were exploded, literally and figuratively, with protests in America, looting, that kind of protest, and in Israel, the anti-Netanyahu protests. What you had was this pressure cooker exploding in both countries, as I said, elsewhere in the world as well, but I'm focusing on America and Israel. And by the time the election for the US presidential election came around, and also the several rounds of Israeli elections, what you had was personal animosity towards the leader of those countries, the leaders, Trump and Netanyahu, personal animosity towards them, not only on the part of the enemies, the enemy camp, the left, in other words, but in their own camp, Republicans in America and right-wingers in Israel. And so what you had suddenly was this something incredibly similar, where both countries were on a high and now, and all of a sudden crash. In a very short time, two great leaders are gone. Now, this doesn't mean they're not going to make a comeback, et cetera, and I'm not going to go into that. And I don't actually believe, unlike many of my fellow right-wingers, I don't believe that the American election was stolen, nor do I believe that our new prime minister in Israel, Naftali Bennett, achieved his seat fraudulently. Okay, I don't happen to believe that. I think he knew how to manipulate the system. He out-manipulated Netanyahu, he out-manipulated everybody else, and he did this very legally. What he did was create a coalition that by all legal standards in Israel is acceptable. Sadly, it wasn't what most of the public wanted. That's, in both countries, because I think the other irony is that Americans and Israelis, if you look at the country as a whole, the populace as a whole, not the cultural icons, not the politicians, not academics, you look at the populace in both countries is generally conservative, generally patriotic, for example, Zionist, patriots in America, not believing in America, in cancel culture, and in Israel, not believing that Israel is an evil occupier or villain in the world. Most of the publics in both countries. So now you have this incredible situation where not only was Trump defeated, and not only was Netanyahu defeated, but now you have the rise of two governments that, I don't want to use the word pretend, but for lack of a better word, I will at the moment, pretend to be centrist when in fact there is a dangerous far left element pulling at them. Now that's especially true in the United States, where the Democratic Party purposely selected Biden as their candidate, knowing the American public may be uncomfortable with Trump, but what they certainly are not is a bunch of radicals. And the Democratic Party has been radicalizing, not only slowly, but recently, quickly. Needed a figure who could could appeal to a great number of Americans. And in Israel, I think Yair Lapid is a similar kind of figure who he's really been on the left, clearly, and he calls himself centrist. And he even did a very smart thing on his part by allowing Naftali Bennett, who had very few seats in the Knesset, or won very few seats, to become prime minister first. So what we have here is a similar situation in both countries with a very dangerous rush back to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear deal with Iran. Now, Biden said all along in his campaign and when he became president that it's crucial to go back to the original deal, or at least create an improved one, because in the eyes of the Democrats, the only way to prevent a nuclear bomb in Iran is through appeasement, negotiations, the usual crap that never works, never has worked, always leads to the opposite of what the peace camp claims it will lead to. And in Israel, you have an interesting mixture of people with very different ideologies, but because each one fears losing, each one knows, includes our Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, and all the smaller parties, the left-wing parties, Meretz, Labor, and the Arab party, Ra'am, know that if they make too many waves, if one of them leaves, the whole government collapses. And in that event, each one knows that he himself, his party, is going to suffer from it. And so it's not in any of their interests right now to allow that to happen. So what we have to observe, let's say, the pessimists are saying, okay, it's all finished. The left in Israel is going to take over, has taken over. And let's say the Bennett supporters who are giving him a chance say, no, Bennett is a true Zionist, a true patriot. He's also on the right. So he's certainly not going to let the left wing of that coalition take over. This is something we actually don't know yet. We don't know yet how this is going to pan out, but there is great cause for concern because though I agree that even the greatest leaders like Netanyahu at some point end their careers, and that they sometimes die. In some countries there are time limits. In our system, in the Israeli system, we don't have time limits because it's a parliamentary system where the head of the party is actually elected, not the person himself. The party is elected. So it's not that I'm so concerned that I didn't expect Netanyahu to be the prime minister of Israel until, forever, or until he's 120 years old. No. However, the way he was ousted was very ugly, meaning that because his personal foes and political rivals have been unable to beat him at the ballot box repeatedly and unable to beat him in coalition building, they resorted to bogus indictments and various other things and smearing him to bits. The way this went down is unacceptable. And I think a similar thing happened in the United States, vilifying Trump. Now, to be fair, both Trump and Netanyahu, each in his own different way, have character flaws that cause people in their close circle to get disgusted with them. And that's a shame, because it's a shame, that should, let's say, take precedence over the interest of the country. And it's also a shame that great men often, let's say it's like a Greek, you're talking about being in a Greek cave. It's like a Greek tragedy when somebody so great, his hubris leads to his terrible downfall. And in this case, I think totally unfairly for the people they were leading. So I'm going to end there at this moment to open the floor to discussion with you, Lowell and Asher and Les, to see what you have to say or to ask.
Okay, Asher or Lowell, if you want to ask any comments or ask any questions or make any comments.
Thank you, Les and Ruthie. Don't tap me, because I am not shy, nor am I a man of few words. And I can tell you right off, I applaud you, the courage. Can you imagine it should take courage from someone from, let's say, right of center to say that the election in America was not stolen. It was the most participatory election ever, and with no glitches at all. And I'm talking as a moderate, progressive, liberal Republican. I still retain the Republican registration, although I have voted since 64 when I crossed the aisle to vote for LBJ for the Republican candidate, for the Democratic candidate on a third party ticket so that I would not feel so guilty. I'm a Rockefeller, Javits, Lefkowitz type of Republican. And I've been called a rhino, but actually all the others are the rhinos. But specifically, I couldn't disagree with you more on virtually everything. Bibi Netanyahu was terrific then in the early years. He overstayed his welcome. He should have been gone a long time ago, because as he stayed, he gained more opportunity to abuse power, and he has done so. He has also given himself and his family opportunities to self-aggrandize financially, and he has done so. In comparison, Trump is in no way comparable to any of the achievements of Bibi Netanyahu. He is an empty suit. He is a nothing. In everything he has touched, he has failed, and he has betrayed what is most important. He has betrayed our country. He has betrayed our country to encourage sedition and insurrection, and not own up to it. It boggles the mind.
Prof. Usher, can I just interrupt
ahead,
for a minute?
Please, yeah,
You
you
know,
can interrupt
that's a
me.
very, I don't want to get into, because Ruth is expert, but you know, when Trump came into power, North Korea was a tremendous threat to America. And to say Trump is a nothing, he actually met with him when no one else had met with Kim Jong-un. And, you know, and look, they ceased to be a threat. What he did with the Abraham Accords, John Kerry, and I remember it so clearly, said there will never be peace with Israel and its Arab neighbors until the Palestinian issue is solved. Well, Trump and Netanyahu actually proved John Kerry wrong, because there was, and there is peace.
Yes,
And today, hold on, Prof. Usher, today that they opened up an Israeli embassy in Dubai. And what's amazing with Lapid, and I must give him due, he actually thanked both Trump and Netanyahu for having initiated this incredible process. So I don't think that, you know, it's fair to say that Trump is a nothing, because, you know, he had his problems, obviously, but moving the embassy to Jerusalem is a major big deal. It's gigantic. And I don't know.
No, that's not the only thing, however. The economy under Trump had never been so great. And if it hadn't been for the pandemic and the lockdowns, he would have won that election. Number two, he fought bravely against the cancel culture. He was unapologetic about putting down that ridiculous and the horrible anti-Semitism of the left. That's why his enemies kept saying that the white supremacists, the Nazis, were in favor of him. That was the reason, because in fact, white supremacy is not a threat in the United States at all, whereas just Students for Justice in Palestine and Black Lives Matter, they are threats, anti-Semitic threats from the left.
Okay, 30,718 lies have been mentioned in his record. You cannot rule when the public distrusts you and doesn't have confidence in you. So he's a proven liar, just an out and out, number one. Number two, you mentioned the Abrahamic Accords. Of course, we applaud. However, it is with people and with statelets that are relatively insignificant, and we have had good relations with them in commercial ties. They were not combatant nations. I would have been much more excited, and I still am, and insistent on having Iraq, for example, on having Saudi Arabia, for example, say Israel has a right to exist, and we are moving to indicate that we are moving our embassy to Jerusalem. The same thing for Greece. By the way, to bring some historical context, the issue of Jerusalem was in the original Resolution 181, which established the demarcation of a state for Palestine and a state for the Jews. It was deferred specifically, wisely, to the future until there is an accommodation between the two peoples. We're still waiting for that. For having the brainless Trump say, I'm going to do what no other president does is ridiculous. It's not worth any.
Okay, I have to add something here, which is I'm enjoying this conversation because the forensic audit in Arizona is coming to a close. And within 2 months, I'm going to have to help Professor Mattathias wipe a whole chicken farm worth of eggs off his face.
I'll wait.
And
I'll wait.
I'm following this every day with, after all these years, I've found real sources of information to get what I want to know. And there are delegations that have come from all over the United States, from other states, to study how the forensic audit is being done in Arizona so they can begin those audits in their own states. What the audits will show is the most massive election fraud in American history. And you're going to see it very soon, as a matter of fact. And then when that happens, all the Jewish and Israeli world's leading experts are going to have a problem. What they'll probably say is, well, we knew it all along. But there's no point in speculating now about it, because the audit, which is coming to an end, is going to be released. In fact, I'll tell you when the results will be released. The results will be released in August, and Trump and the Patriots are preparing for that. If you ever notice, 500 people watch. It's such absolute and utter nonsense to say that Mr. Biden, who can hardly get 10 people for a rally if he didn't pay for them, won with a huge majority. Trump can pull in millions for his views on Rumble and YouTube within one day. You go to the White House YouTube channel, Biden gets 510,000 dislikes. You can play with the numbers up to a point. But what you have a situation here is where the Jewish and Israeli emperor has no clothes. I've seen it so many times. So let's put this on the side and remember this conversation 2 months from now, because we're going to have whole chicken farms worth of eggs that have to be wiped off of all sorts
I'll
of
volunteer
faces.
to come and clean up.
And so, like you saw that Trump had his rally on Shabbat, and then the next one, hundreds of thousands attended, millions tuned in online. Biden has nothing like that, because the reality—
He said nothing, though. He said nothing.
That is not the point. If Biden really won with all the support that Biden has, the support maybe of, prisoners of Second Avenue in the New York Jewish world, a few people who live in their own fantasy world. But out there in the real America, he has the overwhelming support of the country. Also, the Dominion voting machines they don't have flaws. They're designed for cheating. They should really be called deception. And Mike Lindell, the Patriots—
My pillow.
What?
My pillow guy.
That's right. They have tracked as I already sent you, Asher, the German government was aware the very night of the election about the fraud and didn't inform Trump. But of course, that never happened, because we're Jewish world's leading experts. And if we say it didn't happen, what do you want from the German government? It's just the government. I know best. When this all comes out, as it will in the next few months, it will be 10 times the size of Khrushchev's exposure of Stalin's crimes in March 1956 at the Soviet Party Congress. And among the hardest hit when those crimes were revealed were the Jewish Stalinist communists. Some committed suicide, some went insane. Others spent years saying it was all a conspiracy theory against Stalin, who was their man god. One of the worst was Lillian Hellman, who for many years afterwards continued to lie. And she knew it was a lie, but you can't lose face, and Stalin's our god, and truth is whatever we need it to be. But let's put that on the side. Ruthie, I have a question related to what you have been discussing, which is, how long do you think this government can last before it falls apart? When it's like a wedding cake made of grenades with the pins half pulled. What's going to take the first before they have a food fight in the Knesset dining room and they burn down the whole place?
Well, I'll tell you, interestingly, though this is a motley crew of completely disparate parties, they seem to be very chummy. The individuals among them seem to be very friendly with one another, partly because they're so happy to have ousted Netanyahu or gotten rid of Likud as the governing power, the governing body. So right now, there's kind of a party going on, and even certain very contentious issues have not led to huge fights. And the one I'm thinking of in particular is that there's the extension of the family reunification law that, of course, Mansour Abbas, the head of the Ra'am party, the Islamist party, it doesn't want. And so he's not voting for it. And the coalition needs Likud, the opposition, to support it in order for it to pass. And Likud said, nothing doing. You think now you want our help? Forget it. I actually thought that was a bad move. I think the Likud should stay loyal to its principles and not engage in petty behavior when there's something like this on the table. However, what was interesting to me about it is that it didn't cause Mansour Abbas to leave the government. It didn't cause them to scream at each other in the Knesset. It caused Mansour Abbas to say, we have problems, but we'll work them out. It was all very sort of gentlemanly. I think the real problem you're going to see is in our next war. I mean, it could happen before then. I honestly don't know. Because in spite of what fellow right-wingers say to me about how Naftali Bennett is not a real right-winger, and neither is Ayelet Shaked, and neither is this one and that one, and Gidon Sa'ar, and they're just traitors. I don't see them as traitors. I see them as politicians who wanted to get ahead. Excuse me, do you know a politician that doesn't stick out his elbows and try to get ahead? I mean, that's who they are. That's who politicians are. What I think, though, is that the friction could come up with the next, I don't know, let's say the next war in Gaza, or something unforeseen that could cause Labor, Meretz, and Ra'am to protest, and then maybe the right-wingers in the coalition will cave. That's what we don't know yet. It seems almost impossible that this government will last a full 4 years, and 2 more years, at which time Yair Lapid is supposed to become prime minister. I mean, let's face it, Israel rarely has a 4-year government. I mean, and this one just doesn't seem likely. Now, I have to say, I hope that in one way, I want to give Naftali Bennett a chance. I hope that he's not going to think out, because I want what's best for the country. I don't want to spite him just in order, because I'm offended what he did to Netanyahu. That I don't want to do. And yet I still want to give credit. See, I disagree with Asher that Netanyahu totally, all the negative things he said about him. I think Netanyahu was Israel's greatest leader. Not only was he the longest serving prime minister, I think he was the greatest. with severe character flaws. And guess what? And also, you know what? When everyone attacks his wife, you know who had a crazy wife? Abraham Lincoln had a crazy wife. And there are many others. So, you know, you can't, that's sort of irrelevant, considering the great achievements that have been made. That's not to say that Israel won't continue to make great achievements without Netanyahu. Of course not. The Israeli people are not only resilient in the face of war, but very, very innovative and very clever in many, many ways, and with a great vitality that characterizes the country. So, you know, I don't think, I personally don't think that this leader or that leader is going to make a difference to the Israeli society.
Okay, Ruthie, can I say something here? You know,
Sure.
Asher, you mentioned about Saudi Arabia. You know, there was a secret meeting that Netanyahu was actually in Saudi Arabia, and that actually was quite an amazing thing that he actually did. It wasn't so well reported because it was supposed to be secret, but it did leak out. But what, Ruthie, what you mentioned, I think is
But he
quite interesting.
encouraged Salman's being a murderer, you know, with Khashoggi, etc. By the way, as far as the Arab input in the government, I wonder frequently, is there such a danger to him personally? Can he go to Gaza, for example? Can he go to Judea, Samaria at liberty and loom around the people, his people, I mean? You know, I worry about the physical.
He had bodyguards during the campaign. He had bodyguards.
Yes.
But once he won the seats, see, this is an interesting thing in Arab culture, which all Arabists explain, that he was tying himself to the strong horse. In his eyes, Israel, finally, he needs the strong horse to back. The Palestinians are not that. Okay,
Right.
and these Arabs in Israel, the Israelis, the Arab citizens of Israel, have been wasting their time and squandering their capital on championing the Palestinians,
Yeah.
who are murdering terrorists and all that, and all they're doing in their own societies at home in
Which
Israel.
means that he may play a very vital role in
Yes.
quieting the Arab street.
He
You know,
might.
during the war,
might.
there was an uprising in
Yes.
Jewish communities, unheard of.
Yes, but you see, that's when he said, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to join your coalition. Don't forget, when that happened, he said, I'm not with the Zionists. Okay, which is why, and then it ended, and then he did join the coalition, which is why I'm saying that a new war, an outbreak of violence, that could change everything. However, if he leaves the government, his life is probably in more danger. See, at least he now has the cachet of somebody strong who is doing something for his own community, but also that he pulled a fast one over the Jews. You see, because let's face it, he doesn't deny being loyal to the Muslim Brotherhood, affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood. This is not a secret. But you know, in fairness to Bennett, Lapid, and the rest of them, it's Netanyahu who first courted Mansour Abbas.
Yes.
So you know, we can't forget that. And he's
By
the
the
one
way,
who made him kosher.
Even when he's out of government, he may the Muslim Brotherhood or some lunatic may take revenge on him and just knock him off anyway. You know, even
could be. He has bodyguards. He did throughout the whole campaign. It was clear. It was getting his life was threatened and all that.
Benny Gantz is still waiting for his 2 years of power,
Yes.
you know, so
Yes.
I'm not going to hold Lapid responsible for assuming power in 2 years. But on the other thing, which is troubling, you know, both so-called, these are, I think, in my opinion, false issues, the cancel culture and the critical race theory.
False issues?
It's false. I am a professor. I teach the glory of America, but I also balance that to some extent with the faults of America, and to deny that we have had race as being central to our development is a non
Excuse
sequitur.
me, excuse me. Do you know that every school kid now has a curriculum that says he has to go home and
you
talk
don't
to
have
his
to
parents
follow.
about their racism? Come on, this
Oh,
is
yeah, well,
appalling.
and taking down the monuments. Of course, we should take down those monuments. Is
Really?
that so? Yeah.
Really? Like the monument to Frederick Douglass? What do you mean? Do you know they were taking down monuments?
The monuments to Robert E. Lee and to many bases, military bases that have secessionist generals honoring. I mean,
Really?
it's about
And you want
time.
to
It's
tell me
about
that the
time.
animals, you want to tell me that the animals looting and stealing and bashing statues,
segment,
wait a
segment.
second, bashing statues, even knew who those people they were? I got news for you. You'd be lucky to find one of those rioters who knows anything about history, including his own history and any other
By the
history.
way, 70% of the American Jews are what I describe as moderate and progressive people, without whom there would be no civil rights movement. So,
Right,
you know,
exactly. Which is why it's appalling that there's such rampant black
and we are right to
anti-Semitism.
condemn that. No question about it. But that's not the majority. The majority of blacks are with the Jews.
I
in many
agree.
cases. Yeah,
I agree, but
And
what
we
it had, but it's not the majority of the public. It's the majority of the academic institutions and of Hollywood, of all culture.
and
It's
what
the, it
worries
is
me a lot.
it is dominating the culture, not
What-
not the street, but the culture, and that's a powerful thing.
You did
At
not
this point,
mention-
do you realize there are hospitals in the United States where you cannot say what the sex of the baby is when he's born?
No.
Yeah, okay. It has reached insane levels.
But I'm worried most of all about the Israeli-American relationship. And under Bibi Netanyahu, this has frayed a lot.
Wrong. Bibi was not at fault. It's because the Democratic Party has been radicalizing again and again, more and more with each passing year.
It appears radicalized.
And if Bibi, it doesn't matter. Believe me, no, it's not Bibi's
party,
fault.
big 10 party, whereas the Republicans are becoming willy-nilly a minority party. It's a white. And by the year 2042, as I repeatedly said in this program, even the whites will be a minority. And I welcome that. I don't fear that. It will be diversity gone berserk.
It doesn't matter what color people are. It matters what values they have. And the cancel culture. And let me tell you, the Democratic Party is not going to support Israel, even if you had Merav Michaeli as prime minister right now. The Democrats are anti-Zionist. The Democratic Party is succumbing to. The Democratic Party is caving.
If there were, I'd be the first to shout it out. I'd be the first to have the shofar sounding the emergency. But I don't believe that. The Democrats and the Republicans are still unified in support of Israel and Zionism in general. By the way, that's another thing that a lot of people have a problem distinguishing, which is not to be distinguished. If you are anti-Semitic, you are ipso facto anti-Zionist, and to be for Israel is to be Zionist. So I confront my Greek friends who do not know, say, Professor, we are not anti-Semitic, we're just anti-Zionist. I say, get out of here. Yeah. Read what Martin Luther King said, you know, and so on and so forth. So I like to husband that relationship between Israel and America. This is unbreakable.
Won't happen unless only the American people, yes, the politicians are caving more and more to the far left and the far left is anti-Israel. And don't let J Street tell you that it's pro-Israel, because if that's pro-Israel, then, you know, obviously, no, it is anti-Israel. The squad in the Democratic Party is anti-Israel.
A personal dimension, because I supported that's 2 years ago, the ascension of OAC to the Congress as a bright voice. I am on her mailing list. So 2 months ago, I received a fundraising letter, and I said, I beg your pardon, miss. I did not bargain for you to be shown to be anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist. No way. And I wrote, but she still keeps me informed. She sends me her opinions, but which means that it is much more nuanced than to say all Democrats are this or all Republicans are that.
No, no, it's not nuanced. It's not all Democrats. It's that it's that Congress is caving to the far left. The congressional Democrats are caving to the far left members. That's the problem.
Pelosi,
Nancy Pelosi is caving. Chuck Schumer is caving. All the House Democrats.
By the way, OAC may challenge Schumer for the Senate seat next year. Cortez may run for in the primary against.
Yeah, Schumer. So a pox on both of them, as far as I'm concerned. You know? One is worse than the other.
I love you dearly. I love you because I see some of your Americanism has not been lost, even though you live in Tel Aviv. You know, and by the way, I love Lowell because even though he's a right winger, he's my kind of right winger. I also embrace, and I would not give a penny down to any anti-Semite, whether in Astoria or in Greece or any place else. You know.
Right. Suddenly there's silence. Okay,
Ruthie,
so now...
Ruthie, I'd like to mention something. You know, I think it was actually quite unbelievable knowing Israeli politics and knowing that it's very rare that a full, even more than 2 years, even more than 1 year, that a government will survive. So that Lapid, Yair Lapid, who it was like his dream, I think, to become prime minister, was prepared to give it over to Bennett, who actually in the last election, the previous one, the third one, didn't even make the threshold.
Right.
I think he put the country first. You know, there's a lot of things about Yair Lapid that I'm not so mad about, but I think, yeah, he actually did put the country first. And I think it was really quite remarkable that he actually thanked both Trump and Netanyahu for when he opened up the embassy in Dubai. But what's, I think, quite amazing, and this, I can't believe that it actually happened, they actually passed in the Knesset, and it passed with the new unity government building in Yehuda v'Shamron. That actually passed, and that is actually quite, to think that Meretz, which is part of the government, actually part, and Labour, which you have Merav Michaeli, who's not very, he's pretty left-wing, but Meretz, which is extreme left-wing, but they passed and they passed it, and they actually allowed for building to continue in parts of the Yehuda v'Shamron in the West Bank. I think that's actually quite astounding.
I agree. I think that's why I'm saying that we have to wait and see what happens, because what we don't know at the moment is whether this is a calculated move on the part of the left. Let the right have a little this, have a little that, and then on big issues we're gonna call in the chips. We don't know. I can't say that's gonna happen. We don't know. But we do know that it's shaky because it's a shaky coalition because of its extreme ideological diversity. Now, if the Likud had managed to form a coalition with the Haredi parties and others, and even if it had accepted Ra'am, it still would have been more heavily, let's say, slanted in Netanyahu's direction. Today, this is a coalition that's made up of such a mixture that it's hard to tell. And I read all the comments from my Likud friends of different, let's say different, not all in the same level of conservatism in Likud, who are very distraught over this new government. And I see some Bennett voters who are very distraught. And then I see others who are saying, wait, maybe, give this a chance before we start getting hysterical over it. Also, we have no choice. This is the government. And I certainly never would say, like the Democrats started this. He's not my president. The Democrats did that to Trump. Only the right wing's not allowed to say it, but I never said that about anybody. And I don't say it now. I don't say that's not my prime minister. That's not my, no. Okay. In a democracy, you cannot say that it's all finished just because you don't like the results. And you blame Trump for that, but it all started with anti-Trump people.
Ruthie, why? Just in my own mind, why didn't Lapid become the prime minister first? His party,
because Bennett. No, I'll tell you why.
Oh, because his party has more seats.
No, because he couldn't form a coalition. Because Bennett said
he couldn't. Right,
that's why he couldn't. Bennett said, either you make me first or we don't have a coalition. And Ram said, okay, so I won't sign. And then we would have had new elections.
Okay.
That's exactly why. And by the way, he was willing to join Bibi as well. He was willing. He said, okay, you get Ram and you get me. And then Bezalel Smotrich from the religious Zionists said, I'm not sitting with Ram. And that's why Bibi didn't have enough.
He wasn't willing. Bibi was not willing to give up even one day of his throne.
No, what are you talking about? Give up? Why should he have? He had the most seats of anybody. Why should he give it up? Really, the victor, the person who had the more seats than anybody else, the party that had way more seats than any other individual party. Right. That's the one that should quit? No, but he couldn't form a coalition. That's true. But that, in this case, was because Bezalel Smotrich said, no, I'm not doing it. But Bennett was willing to sit with him. So then Bennett went to the highest bidder on the other side. And he said, if you want me, I have to be prime minister first. That's how it happened. And Lapid said, okay, fine, anything to destroy Netanyahu. Anything. That's what this coalition was based on. Anything to destroy Netanyahu.
Is there any stomach left, any desire down the road to reform the election process, to make it district-wide, more like the American, so that you would consolidate parties in the so-called big tent political coalition?
I've been hoping for that for years, and many groups say that it's not democratic, you see, because the interest groups like Haredim and like these, all different interest groups say, hey, that's not fair. We want our budget excluded. No, I know. Look, it's a problem with this system. It's a parliamentary system that is not based on geography. Also, Israel is so tiny. It's not like Britain, where you could have regionals. Israel, one region. Israel is like, one neighborhood in New York. The whole country. It's a little, listen, I'm all for reforming it. And I think the electoral threshold should be raised way up high. I think it is a waste of so many votes that you have, had 30 parties running or something. That's insane. The marijuana party and this party and that party, the left thumb party and the right thumb party. I think it's silly.
Right.
But, it was, so I hope it's reformed. But in any case, I still haven't made up my mind entirely about what's happening here. And I don't believe the government will last. And the reason I don't is because the glue is now that Netanyahu is out, and once he leaves Balfour Street, which he's doing, I think on July 6th, if I'm not mistaken, then what glue do they have to keep them together?
Right.
Before they had protests outside his house. Now what? Now what do they have?
Right. I have a question, Ruthie. Wouldn't it be good to go back to a system like years ago when we had a separate election from the prime minister? That I would think that introduced a little bit more democracy into the country to give people more choices. Israel, Professor Eidelberg explained it once. I hope he's still doing okay. He's very old now. I'd like to get him to speak. that Israel is the only country in the world where you don't have MPs who represent a district. I mean, in Europe, all of them except maybe Holland, you have a mix. You can vote for a certain number from the party and a certain number. Churchill had a constituency. In Israel, there is no such thing.
Oh, we
And
did have that once, but
We
here's the
did?
thing. The reason no, we once had it where we had direct election where you put one vote for prime minister and the other for the party.
Yes,
Yes,
but they
we did
stopped
have that
that.
once, but I'll tell you something. So Netanyahu wanted to go back to that this time, but nobody wanted, but his enemies didn't want that. And they didn't want it because they knew he'd win. Because in all the polls, even though people said this is no good, and whatever they said, Bibi came out way ahead of other politicians who's most suited to be prime minister. What you're gonna do? It's the truth. So they didnwant that. They were afraid to have direct election because Bibi would have won it. You see. So, so I don't know, but I do think that if Bibi were smart and the Likud were smart right now, it would show itself to be statesman-like. I mean, Bibi would show himself to be statesman-like and not petty, because if there's any chance of Likud recouping, whenever the next election is, recouping its place as the biggest party, whether with Netanyahu at the helm or not, it has to behave in a certain manner. And sadly, too often, its members behave like a bunch of boors.
Well, I would like to say something in defense of Israel. Asher and I have discussed this, and now Asher comes from Greece, where after the war, I mean, remember Costa Gavras' movie starring Yves Montand? I thought he was Jewish, but apparently he isn't, who portrays the great Greek politician who's hit on the head and killed. And then they banned the letter Z from the vocabulary of the colonels because it means he lives or something. It's a wonderful movie. Now, Costa Gavras, this is just a footnote.
Labrakis, by the way, the guy's name was Labrakis, the victim.
Labrakis. So I just wanted just a footnote that he did make a good movie a few years ago on SS officer Kurt Gerstein, who attempted to reform the Vatican about the Nazi mass murder of the Jews. And he was totally freaked out that nobody wanted to listen. And he prepared his reports, the Gerstein report. He was in charge of, he worked with the SS, and he tried to destroy shipments of the Zyklon B gas. He was in charge of producing them. They couldn't destroy them all. And what really destroyed him was that nobody wanted to listen. And he went to the Swedish ambassador, he went to the Vatican representative. Costa Gavras has a beautiful movie about that, beautifully done as a movie, even though he's not very friendly to Israel, which comes up to another issue, is that often many people in the European left, there's kind of ideological schizophrenia. Yes, I'm very serious about remembering the Holocaust, but you Jews are Nazis over there. They don't even see a contradiction. But that's just, why did I even mention that? So my point was this, that Asher knows what political violence is like, not just, well, he was a baby, he didn't know the difference. He was, by the time he was 10 years old, was 1953, and then they got to come to God of Israel, bless America. But he knows what, Greeks know what political violence is, whether it was with the Turks and independence, and before the war, after the war, the communist revolution, the anti-communist revolution. I would say in Israel's defense, on that issue, that something should be pointed out to as Israelis as well as everybody else, that we're able to go through 4 or 5 elections and most people follow the rules. You could have had warlords gunning each other down in the streets like in 1920s China. Look at Yugoslavia during the 1990s. That's not that long ago. That's not, Biafra or Bangladesh with the Pakistani army. That's Europe. And not that long ago, it didn't push and a shove. And then as soon as Tito's dead, they're all going at it again like they did in World War II.
Central America, Nicaragua.
Or Nicaragua, how many thousands of people disappeared in South America, being thrown out of
in Argentina
helicopters, thousands and thousands. So here, I'll tell you what an Arab told me. Before this lockdown stuff started, I used to do my work. I'll do wherever I plug in my computers where I do my work. So I would go to, I shouldn't say where it is because it could get in trouble. I would go to one of the hotels which has a nice cafe, and for 12 shekels, I can get my coffee and all the cookies I want because they all like me and they just dump it on with a coffee. So I asked one of them who was an Arab, I said, you know, I really admire your culture, the Chamulot, you all help each other and you have such strong family structures. And you know, when one of you gets married, you all contribute money to the sheikh, the patriarch, and to build a new house for a family. He looked at me with this ironic smile. He said, you like my culture? I said, yes. He said, let me tell you something. In your culture, when people have a fight, most of the time they push, they shove, they scream, they rant, they rave, they screech, they bang on their chest like apes and monkeys and baboons. And that's it. He said, in my culture of the Chamulot, which is the Muslims have about 300. The other guy who worked there, a Christian, told me, he said, we don't have Chamulot, the Christian Arabs, that's the Muslim Arabs. He also told me what would happen tomorrow if all the Jews were gone today. That's another issue. So the Arab said, the young man said, in my culture, when we have a dispute within the families, within our Chamulot or between our Chamulot, within 5 minutes, we take out the guns and the knives. He said,
Yeah.
I prefer your version.
Yeah.
This is the Arab talking. So if you think of it, most of the time, Israel, what, like you said, it's the size of New Jersey, the population density of Singapore, and we don't even realize how many different ethnic and religious groups are here. I don't even mean within the Jewish world where there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds from all over the world. In the non-Jewish world, I mean, you have 5,000 Uzbeki Muslims. Who ever heard of such a thing that came here hundreds of years ago because they wanted to be in the Temple Mount for religious reasons? They're Sufi mystics. Sheikh Abdulaziz Bukhari, the head of the Uzbeki Muslim community, it was under his supervision and Sheikh Palazzi that I wrote my book, Cracking the Quran Code on the Land, Torah, and People Covenants with Israel in the Quran and Islamic tradition. That's not the point. The point is you've got, let's say, if you really count the small groups, like the Samaritans, what, there's 200 of them left or something in Cholon, and they're like 9 feet tall with these long necks. More or less, most of the time here, wouldn't you agree, people get along with each other most of the time. Look at America. Look where we came from, Ruthie, New York. It was a big deal when the murder rate went down from 2,000 a year. Now, Israel's what, 80% of the size of America. If we had 800 murders a year, it would be a national catastrophe. New York's like routine. Look at Detroit.
Yep.
Most of the time,
Chicago.
even Chicago. Yeah, Chicago. Oh, Chicago. Look, we got it pretty good here. Most of the time, push, shove, most people, it's amazing how many cultures can get along and follow the rules, letter of the law, all of them, Arabs too, in choosing a new government. And okay, Netanyahu doesn't like it. Why should he? He's been there so long. And the government has become a family affair with his wife and his son. We got a trinity, a triumvirate there. Like
Yeah,
the
that's
three
true.
Caesars, the tetrarchs. But he'll go. I think that says a lot for Israeli, and I mean with a capital I, political culture for all the groups compared to other countries. Look at Romania, when Ceausescu fell, 10,000 dead in 1 week. Those are real numbers because the
And
security.
it's the cause of envy. Is to so many people I know personally from the Greek reaction. They constantly. I'm sometimes interviewed on Greek radio programs and say, Professor, we admire you, your unity. I said, have you visited the 5 towns lately? Where the local newspaper, the weekly newspapers make a distinction between the type of orthodoxy that you observe, and you are not deemed of value if you are conservative or reform or Sephardic. I said, what? We survived the Holocaust in order to come here and see this. And the other thing is, they tell me, it's amazing. The closeness of America and Israel, even without the benefit of a formal treaty. We don't have a formal alliance. It just is. It just is. And I said to the Greeks in Greek sometimes, try it. you tried anti-Semitism, you try hating the Jews, you try to eliminate the Jews, try some love. You will see no country has prospered that has condemned and persecuted Jews. If you change your tune, you too will come up. And then I leave them with this thought, which is something that brings tears to my eyes. What would Greece have been like had the 55 to 60,000 Salonican Jews survived that dynamic culture? You know, it would have been so terrific, including my maternal grandparents and two uncles I'd never met, all up in smoke, literally.
Yeah. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, and I will say, Lowell,
Could you say
I
something about
totally-
Israeli political culture? Because Israelis are so used to criticizing themselves.
yes, yeah,
that,
Yes.
And
That's
I have
true.
my own list, you want the dinner menu or the a la carte menu? But I have to sit back and say, wait a minute, look at this. Look at some of the other countries, so-called advanced countries. I think Israel's doing pretty good. Well, you're a political commentator and an experienced writer. What do you have? You're the expert, actually, on the subject. One of them, and recognized in Israel and abroad as such. What do you have to say about Israeli political culture?
First of all, I'd like to say something about Israeli culture, non-political culture, if there is such a thing in Israel, because I think they're completely blended in Israel, which is actually nice. What's nice about it, it's also enraging because you can't escape politics. But what's nice about it is that you have the most, let's say, if you compare it to the average American who on campuses, we've seen this with roving reporters, don't even know who the vice president is. Israelis know who the president of every European country is. Average Israelis, uneducated Israelis, know more about what's going on in the world and in their country than others. As I said, even the uneducated ones. So that's nice. The trouble is you can't ever escape politics. But what I've always said about Israel is that Israel is a heroic country, and not for the usual reasons that people say, which are valid, you know, success in war and the Entebbe raid, and we've got all kinds of, you know, and the Mossad, the incredible Mossad raid in Tehran to bring back all those nuclear documents. We've done heroic things, but that's not what I mean. I think that average Israelis are heroic for the fact that no matter what's going on, no matter how many missiles are falling, you'll still overhear at a cafe, two women saying, "Oy, what am I going to cook for Shabbos tonight?" And this one saying, "I went out with this guy last night. Do you think he's going to call me today?" And this is after a place was blown up right next door. Okay.
Yeah.
This, in my view, is heroic. I remember in the time of the suicide bombing war, the Second Intifada, where daily buses were blowing up and cafes, restaurants were blowing up. And the next day, you know, clean up the blood, clean up the glass, and people are back. Of course, they're devastated by the dead and the wounded. But alongside that was, oh my God, I don't know what to cook for dinner. And that's what's heroic about Israelis. And the truth is that with all this political insanity, listen, I have a close friend who is completely opposite politically from me. And she was on a political program, a famous one, a few years ago. Everyone is yelling at each other in Hebrew. And I watched her. And though I didn't agree with her politics, you know, I watched her to tell her she put on a good show. And I called her up and I said she was on a panel with equally important figures in Israel. And I called her up to say, you know, you did a really good job. And she said, did I look fat? And you see, she's a big feminist, leftist feminist, but you know what? She's a girl. She cares about, did she look fat on TV? Politics. So, you know, and this is the side of Israel that I see all the time. I mean, everybody sees it, But I take a special note of it because the complaining and the kvetching I hear about daily life shows you how heroic people are. Because believe me, if you have rockets falling down and you're running around and you're still capable of caring whether you look fat on TV or whether that your mother-in-law is coming over and she's going to be pissed off that you didn't make a 3-course meal, that takes guts and it takes something, fortitude. And that is why I love living in Israel. Love it.
That's a wonderful way that you put it.
Love it.
I'd like to add something about that, about Arabs. The fact is, thousands of Arabs serve in the medical system as doctors and nurses, and or come to take. I was a volunteer. I was a volunteer for 1 year until the lockdown stuff started. What was from January 2019 to January 2020, Hadassah and Kerem Oncology Clinic. That was for people. You weren't coming there for surgeries. It was adults coming there for consultations, and they did some chemotherapy downstairs. And you just have to go into any hospital and see that they're filled with Arabs and Jews together. Yeah. Arab and Jewish doctors and nurses and orderlies. If there's even one incident where an Arab went crazy and screamed Allahu Akbar and started murdering Jews, I'd like to know about it. I haven't heard about it. And if it was, it would be we're talking about in 70 years of a state. You have thousands of Arab Muslims and Christians and Druze, all right, they are a separate group, and Bedouins who serve in the police, army, and border police. Yes. And when on our Chagim, they guard us. I'm not aware of one incident, and even if it happened, where any of them went Allahu Akbar or you're Christ killers if they're Christian, and took out his machine gun and started killing everyone. It didn't happen. And these, I'll tell you what I saw the other day. I was taking a walk and I was near the Sultan Pool, and the gate was closed, and there were the bomb squad was there. And I went to talk to them. They were examining a suspicious object. This was during all the rockets being shot. And one of the members of the bomb squad was an Arab. And he was telling me about an Arabic saying, something that had to do with the eyes, mothers crying. I wrote it down in phonetic English, the Arabic words in English. But the point is, who is in the bomb squad is an Arab. So if the Israeli, I have to say, the police and the army are getting much better at the addressing the nations. They have think Yiddish, dress British guys like Les, who have those nice accents like Abba Eben, and who are the spokespeople. And you want a guy who can talk proper English, and the King's English with a U accent or otherwise. See, the trouble with U accent, if it's too high, they talk like they have marbles in their mouths, like in My Fair Lady with Audrey Hepburn, when Henry Higgins makes her put marbles. It's that I don't understand the word they're saying. Okay, so in this Israel, I'm not in any way romanticizing or dealing with, again, it goes according to the Chamulah, where some of the Chamulot, of the 300 Chamulot, are not friendly to Jews. Remember, in the Arab world, everything goes according to the clan, tribe, and family. As we both know, there really are no Arab nations. There are tribal confederations. Most of these nations aren't real, created by the French and the British. They're not real, including in Africa. So there you have to know what's the head of the clans. And of course, individuals can be different.
I told Lowell about this once before. The incongruity of it all, of what you described, Lowell, is the case of a mother whose child was injured almost fatally in Gaza. An Arab mother whose child was taken to Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem.
That's right.
And she followed him. And after a very lengthy operation, the doctor comes out and says, "Madam, don't you worry, your child will survive." And nonplussed, she looks him in the eye and says, "That's all right. I have 2 or 3 other children for Shahid."
Yeah, that now, I'm in no way denying that as well.
No, this is, an exception, to the rule.
Yes.
Well,
Well.
actually, if there you get into issues such as theology, where people are Wahhabis, and Wahhabis, as they are called by Sunnis and Shiites, call themselves Salafis. There you've got a problem, because death is not a deterrence for those who want to die.
No.
And those are very dangerous. That's a whole nother issue. This is Ruthie's talk, not mine. I will get, I just wanted to say that in this cholent pot we live in, it's not just kvetchy, nudniki Jews who get along more or less most of the time. And like you say, well, did I look fat? Or how's my hair do? Or should I go out with that
Yes.
guy and carry on
Yeah.
with daily life as we did in the Warsaw Ghetto? It's amazing organizing.
Exactly.
And no matter what, and that totally freaked out the Goyim who wanted to murder. So what? In fact, one of the things Mr. Christensen told me, the one who resigned from the Nobel Prize Committee, and they had the Peace Prize to Ruthie. Most people don't remember this, but we remember this. He said, "I'm going to tell you why we hate you." Now, of course, he was a big friend of Israel all his life. He said, "The reason we hate you in Norway and Europe is because despite everything we did to you throughout Christian history and the Holocaust, you still thrive and prosper, and it rots our bones with jealousy, envy, and also
envy.
secret hidden guilt, because we can't handle it." That's another issue Asher and I have discussed in terms of the Greek church. But let's go back to Ruthie, who's our guest. I just wanted to put in a plug for Arab Christians and Muslims and Druze and Bedouins and Circassians and Chechens and all these other groups who, there's a whole village north of Lake, the Sea of Galilee, Sulawi. Everyone in the village, they're from an Arab clan that came here from Arabia 100 years ago. All of them are employed in the police, the army, military intelligence, the border police, as are the Cherkessim, the Circassians, and Abu Ghosh, Rechania, and Kfar Kama, that's up near Nazareth. That's a whole other story. Just wanted to say that without romanticizing suicide murderers or mothers to say, wait a minute, I got 2 more shaheeds. Never mind they're being treated in an Israeli hospital. And Ismail Haniyeh sent his child to an Israeli hospital. I don't know why why does Israel put up with it? If Vladimir Putin was here and you fired 1 rocket, there wouldn't be 2. That gets into a whole nother issue of Jewish psychopathology after centuries of persecution and Stockholm syndrome. I don't want to get into that. I want to go back to Ruthie and say, could you say more about what you have known and have written about Israeli culture and how
Look,
even
yes,
with all this
and I, of
fetching
course,
and
have-
fighting, they don't kill each other in the streets. And not, look, there are some parliaments, they beat each other up and shoot each other in the parliament. They didn't do
They
that yet.
do, and we did. I remember, in the ceremony of the swearing in of the new government, there was a lot of screaming. I mean, before the actual swearing in, there were people giving speeches. There was screaming and hysteria, and you would have thought that this, this has never happened. You say, really? It never happened? Let me tell you something. My kids' school teachers there was a common quip in Israeli schools where the teacher was trying to calm down a rowdy class by saying, where do you think you are, in the Knesset? This is not new. The politicians are screaming at each other. And yes, we've seen in other countries in the Middle East where they start throwing shoes at each other. I don't know what, in TV studios. The Middle East Media Research Institute, MEMORY, has some hilarious clips like that, of someone being interviewed in an Egyptian studio, and then suddenly 2 interviewees get up and start punching each other in the middle of, in a live broadcast and throwing the table. So, yes, because let's not forget, Israel is Western, but it's also Middle Eastern. And we got to celebrate that. We're not America. We've caught up to America in this incredible way, in such a short time. But we're also Middle Eastern. We eat Middle Eastern food. We make Middle Eastern gestures. We're loud, okay? And I don't think that's something to be ashamed of. I think that's something to be proud of, because Israel is not just another European country imitating America or something. It's not. It's its own thing. And many years ago, somebody said, is there such a thing as Israeli culture? As though, how many novelists have we produced? How many this, how many, what Israeli, and of course there's Israeli culture. Of course there is. The point though, is that politically, and part of the political culture is hysteria. I want to tell you, when I made Aliyah, when I came to Israel in 1977, it was right after Menachem Begin had come to power. And it was maybe 3 months or 4 months after he came to power. And on the campus of the Hebrew University, people who are now in the Knesset, now ministers or former ministers, were beating each other up on campus, okay? And at the time they weren't in politics yet, but they soon entered the Knesset. At that time, I arrived and I was shocked because coming from America, what do I know? I love Israel. I came a year after the Entebbe raid. To me, Israelis are all Israelis. No, I arrive at the campus. They're saying Menachem Begin is Mussolini. This is a disaster. The country's going to collapse. The left was beside itself.
Yeah.
Begin. Now, listen to everybody talk about Begin. He was so full of integrity. What a leader. What I'm saying, you say that now? I remember what they said about Begin. Okay? And what I mean is people have short memories. The hysteria, the first Lebanon war, there were people saying the country's finished because soldiers are going to jump. They're not going to be willing to fight. They're going to jump out of the tanks. To say that this is the worst that it's ever been and that it's the noisiest it's ever been or the most hostile it's ever been is not only false, it's ridiculous. It's amazing our capacity to forget something that happened 2 minutes ago. Seriously, just look back at Israeli history in general. Another thing, things have never been worse. Really? You mean when Israel was, you mean in 1967, 1973, things have never been worse? I would say things have never been better. And, it depends, it really depends how you look at it. And yes,
in all fairness, Ruthie, it was the fear factor. It's a human attribute of,
yes.
a misgiving that throughout history in Israel, it was ruled by the Mapai, by the Labor Party. And this was the first time that there was this break with the past. And I remember I was a lot younger, more hair, and sitting in the pews of the Safari Temple on Shabbat morning upon Begin's accession to power in 1976. And the rabbi uncharacteristically was dropping on the political angle. Instead of sermonizing about this and that spiritual, he said, congregation, dear congregants, calm down. He is somebody we can work with, America will work with, and he's not what he's being pictured as some kind of bomb thrower, etc., because of his past. And lo and behold, our rabbi was invited to the signing ceremony a couple of years later with Carter in '78 with the agreement of mutual recognition. This is the same man who Ben Gurion said the worst things before Israel was established.
Asha, I just want to mention, and Ruthie, they just made a documentary coming out now on Begin. They just made a documentary.
Yes.
And I think Ben Gurion didn't even acknowledge Begin's name. He would say the man next to the one at the back or on the right. Yeah. But Ruthie, what you said about Israel being this incredible country, after that terrible disaster at Meron, and thank God we are going to have a commission of inquiry. It was after Shabbos, the following week, families that had lost, members, they actually went back to that place and they actually said, Ani Mamin. And I've got video of Hatzolah also going back to the exact place and all singing Ani Mamin. It's actually quite unbelievable. And when we had, unfortunately, Akashi, you mentioned the so-called, it was riots in the Lod and in Haifa. The one, unfortunately, there was an Israeli who was killed in Lod, and his family allowed for they donated, I think, a kidney or donated to an Arab family, which is unbelievable if you think about it. And on the other side, in Haifa, there was a male nurse that saved an Israeli who was nearly lynched to death. And now they fought this amazing one. Israel is unique.
In Jaffa as well. In Jaffa as well, somebody being lynched was saved by an Arab. Yes,
By an
That's
Arab,
right.
yes, yes.
It is
Yes,
an
that's
incredible
right.
country, and
And
it's amazing. It's every day is a miracle here. It really is.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd
it
like
is
to
America.
add,
And I'll tell you one thing that I used to always say about Israel, and I still say it, though I have friends who say, oh, you're wrong, you're wrong. I still believe this. Say Israel is a country where the same guy who gives you the finger outside, from his speeding car, will give you mouth-to-mouth resuscitation if you
Absolutely.
call
right, yes.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
I think that
Ruthie,
says it
the
all.
same
That
guy.
says it all. Yeah. It's
you're
so
a
true.
good export from America. You're a good export
Well,
from
we have
America.
3 New York Jews here and 1 expatriate
Although
South
I've
African.
been in Israel so long now, 43
All right.
years. I've been to
American Israeli. I
and
would
all
like,
my kids are Israelis and my grandchildren are Israelis.
Yeah.
well, I would like to add one point, which I've noticed when I tell people things and they know I'm right, they don't say, yeah, you're right. They just look at you with sullen silence. And I deal with a lot on the internet because I'm very theologically oriented. I have a lot of interaction on the internet with people from the radical religious right. I call them, you're American Nazis. And I don't throw around terms. Nazism was a religious movement. It was a Gnostic movement. That's a whole nother issue, which generally goes over the head of Israeli and Jewish historians. It had a political element, but it was a Gnostic religion. What Gnostic religions are, that's a whole nother issue that goes back 6,000 years, and it's usually not good for us. But they will say Zionism, the Zionist state, and they'll maybe bitch, the Catholic and other representatives, they'll bitch about oppression and church rights. So I asked them a question. I said, let me ask you a question. What is it? I said, we both know that Christians are massacred all over the world, right? Nigeria and Pakistan and China. And then in China, they cut them up for their organs and sell them. That's a whole big industry over there. And yeah, and Christians are massacred in the United States in their churches. Yes. I said, did you know there's one country that in the 70 years of its existence, no Christian was ever massacred in any church, raped, murdered, mugged, tortured, ever? I said, you know what it is? What? The Zionist state of Israel. Instead of saying, wow, I have to rethink that. Wait a minute. No, you're the Christ-killing kikes. You're the sin of Satan, serpent seed. I know those verses in the Greek Testament because I was accepted to the Harvard Divinity School to get a master's in church history and theology. I know what the church fathers say about us. Most people don't, including Christians, which is why I've started a monthly seminar called From Gospel to Gas Chamber, History of the Holocaust and Jew Hatred. And I'm not leaving anything out. And I can say things that most Israeli government representatives or Jewish organizational representatives wouldn't dare to say because they would think it would cause a pogrom. So they don't say, wow, no, but maybe they'll think it. But if I was in the Israeli government, sometimes there are things that stare us in the face so often we don't even think about them because they're internalized to us. Necessary to stand back and say, wait a minute, like you said, daily life. I look fat, or I didn't get my hair done right, or is that guy good to go out with? These are points that should be, if I was in the Israeli government, I would say, you can't emphasize this enough. Also, go to work on our neighbors and all the failures of Arab and Muslim societies, just the death tolls, massacre of Christians in Egypt, 1 million dead in the Iran-Iraq war, several 100,000 dead in Lebanon, 40,000 massacred in Black September by King Hussein with Zia-ul-Haq, 3 million Muslims in East Bangladesh massacred by West Pakistanis, and just tell the truth, but they don't do it. Why? Jews are so used to being on trial. You see it in books, well-intentioned. Netanyahu, a place among the nations. No, Bilam says you're a people that dwells alone and won't be reckoned among the nations. Or Alan Dershowitz also making the case for Israel. Are we on trial, Professor? Doesn't it say in Obadiah, saviors will go up on Mount Zion to judge the nations and the kingdom be the Lord? But the Jew is so used to being a crippled dwarf, and I blame the Christians for that. Roman, that's a whole nother subject. That I don't blame, like my father said, the colonel, when there'd be another incident. I said, why don't they defend themselves? Why do they permit this? Vladimir Putin would. He said, wait a minute. Was it better at Auschwitz? And he means that even though the Jew hasn't learned, it's not comfortable with being a warrior yet and using power he might have, was it better at Auschwitz? And he said it takes centuries it take a long time to unlearn that conditioning. Do you think in the two revolts against Rome, 70 CE, the Christians say, well, the temple was destroyed and you were all expelled. Really? How come 70 years later in the second revolt was 5 times as powerful and the Romans had to bring General Julius Severus all the way from England and their best legions? And if we had some strategic depth, which we didn't, like the Germans did when they fought with the Romans and wiped out 3 legions in 7 CE under Varus, and the Romans wanted to beat them up, they just disappeared into the forest, which stretched all the way from Germany to the coast of Japan. We didn't have that. What's the other side? Jordan? So we were surrounded. And it took all their legions to destroy us. That was the Jewish fighting spirit. And one more point. Ord Wingate, he didn't see, this terrible anti-Semitic cartoons and caricatures of the 19th century made of Jews. He didn't see the Jew of Malta or Fagin or Shylock. When he looked at the Jews, he saw Joshua and Gideon. He said, I know what's in this people. This is a fighting people. And of course, he was right, trained the special night squads. And the Arabs and the Christians can't handle that because what? No, I can beat you up or rape you or torture you when I want to. What do you mean you can fight back? You can beat me up? They don't like it. Esau and Ishmael don't like it when Jacob can fight back. But put that on the side. Why did I mention all that? So, so no Christian has ever been massacred, raped, murdered, mugged in any church. And one other point, I won't say work. I know at one place I go, at the desk is a young Coptic Christian from Egypt. I said, I read about all these terrible things happening to you. I said, does the government protect you? He said, no. He said, we never know when the next massacre will be. Do you have self-defense unit? No. I said, so basically you live the way we did in the 1880s in Eastern Europe in the Pale of Settlement. He said, yes. I said, do you have any troubles here in Israel? He said, no. The Coptic Christians safe in Israel? Yes. I would throw the pie right back in the face of any Christian church representative, the Jew haters of the mainline churches, and just simply tell the truth. But anyway, let's go back to Ruthie, because this is Ruthie's show. And one other question for you, Ruthie. What about being a woman in Israel? Do you think ladies are discriminated against in Israeli society?
No.
No. Okay. Could you say something?
In a word, but I'll tell you something. You're asking the wrong woman, so to speak, because it was partly one of the things I fell in love with in Israel was that it hadn't been infected yet by radical feminism to the point where men and women couldn't be men and women. Okay. So as a student, I was halfway through university in Chicago, and then I moved to Israel. And I was on the campus buying books. And some other student, a male student, said something along the lines of, hey, baby, what's your major? And I said, that's it. This is the country for me. Because in America, a guy wouldn't dare do that. And he wouldn't walk you home. And he wouldn't pay for your movie. And he wouldn't, because, we're all equal. And there's no difference between men and women. In the 70s, it was like now, only not as bad as now. It's just the same baloney. That there's no, men and women, and it was letting men off the hook. So I liked it that in Israel, there were manly men and womanly women. So, you ask another woman, you're going to get a different answer.
And yet we haven't had
against. I think women are maybe that's changing too, because, the younger generations my kids may say something different to me. But I think in Israel, it was like, okay to be feminine and masculine and not hide it or not apologize for it.
Why haven't we had another woman prime minister since Golda Meir? And
what do you mean, why not? Because someone didn't come along who got elected, period. Okay, this is not something for affirmative action. Golda Meir became prime minister. There have been women trying to become prime minister in Israel. Thank God Tzipi Livni didn't
Who
succeed.
besides Tzipi is considered?
I considered her a complete idiot who should never have gotten anywhere near.
No, apart from your personal, I mean, who may be
okay.
buying? No.
Maybe there are women who are ambitious. There are women who vie for it and fight for it. There could be. I don't care what sex my prime minister has or anybody else. I don't care. I want them to have my politics and be, in my eyes, to be intelligent in my eyes. Okay? And to say, what, women, there aren't enough women? What does that even mean? It's like saying there aren't enough women, I don't know, astronauts. Okay, maybe not enough girls are interested in being astronauts. Has it ever, you know, how come the basic truth that women and men are born differently and have different natural interests? That's like dirty words today. Okay, anybody with children knows it. You know it. They're born.
Who was that
your
woman?
Your boys are you know, taking dolls and shooting them, and the girls are rocking guns like cradles. You know it. Okay. So
who was that woman who was seen repeatedly next to Bennett? You know, with the.
I electric kid.
Oh, that was okay.
She's okay. She's in the government.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I just.
She was trying to.
I could not identify her.
No,
Yeah.
Ayala Chaked, she's been his number 2 or number 1. The two of them have been together the whole time. She was Israel's justice minister in one of the last governments.
And there are a few in the cabinet. There are a few women.
Many women, most of whom I could do without, okay? Like those far leftists. There are many women. Okay. I don't care that they're women. I care that I think their politics are atrocious.
Yeah, I understand.
But you know, I don't count women. And anybody who does, I have to tell you, when they say, look, there should be more women in government, or some who say, look at us, we have lots of women in government. I already think that it's already sexist, like it's racist to count how many people of color are in something or other, or I can't stand it, okay? I think merit or ambition or like anything should be the judge. And, you know, any woman who is capable of running for office and getting elected and forming a coalition can be prime minister in Israel. It's pure and simple. And if they're not good enough or
Ruthie,
I'm for Ruthie Blum. I'm for Ruthie Blum.
Ruthie, I think I'm
Thanks.
also, and Asha, I really would recommend you can get Jerusalem Post online, get the Jerusalem Post, continue watching R24, and you'll see Ruthie there.
I will.
I
now.
just want to thank you, Ruthie. I just
You
want to
have
mention
a
to you guys,
colleague, Carolyn
Thank you so
Glick.
much, Les.
You also have Carolyn Glick with you, don't you?
No, Carolyn left the Jerusalem Post. She's at Israel Hayom. I'm in her spot on the
Really?
that day. No, I mean, I'm the right-wing woman there now.
But
but
I think
you
you are more palatable. I think.
know,
Well, yeah, I have maybe.
okay,
Maybe because I know you.
Asha, we
And
have
I
to
love
end
you.
off. I just want to mention Ruthie and to Asha and to Lowell, something quite amazing. You know, also with regard to Bennett and the religious party, they actually put Ayelet Shaked as the leader at one time, which was quite amazing as well, because they looked at what was best for the party and what's best for the country. So I want to mention one thing, and I think this will astound you all. You know, I've been following also the politics and what happens in South Africa on a daily basis, because I've got family there and I'm still connected very much. And when the government came into power here in Israel, the coalition unity government with a Islamist, with very, very far left-wing, but really far left-wing, with right-wing, with everybody, it was reported in the South African press that an anti-Netanyahu government came into power. Nothing about, wow, look what's happening in Israel. You've got Arabs in the coalition who are Islamists. You've got people that are deaf. So you have sign language going. You've got somebody who's in a wheelchair. There's so many women who are in the cabinet, so many women in the Knesset. Not a word, only negativity, nothing and this is what could be more positive, but it doesn't fit the narrative when people say that Israel's an apartheid state. And it's so sad because here we actually have proven to the world, but more important, we've proven to ourselves. But it's an amazing thing that in South Africa, and I don't know about other countries, but not a word about this tremendous amalgamation of a coalition from the far left wing to the right wing with Islamists inside, which is historic because it's never happened before and it's working, but no positivity. So we all have to be positive ourselves. And Ruthie, I must just tell you, reading your articles, and I really do mean it, you put such a balance in that paper. My brother, our families had the Jerusalem Post. I don't know if you remember, in South Africa, we used to get the ML edition with this very funny paper. But our family's been reading Jerusalem Post for the last, I don't know, maybe like 40 years, even more. And my brother once said, wow, he loved reading. He said he read the Jerusalem Post and was absolutely brilliant. He said there was just one problem. It was from 5 years ago. But you know what? With you in the Jerusalem Post, it's phenomenal. And I'll continue reading it. I get it on a daily basis. And
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
We look forward to you coming back to R24. And we want to thank you for the most amazing and incredible presentation that you've given. We are so grateful to you, Ruthie.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Looking forward to the next one.
And we look forward to your words of wisdom, really.
Thank you so much.
All the very best, everybody. Keep well and safe. And we should only have good news.
Amen.